Long live Denisha!
Y'all hear about Denisha Delancy? She went on vacation to Sint Maarten, and unfortunately she passed away because she was, I guess, in a crossfire. She was with a famous rug lord down there, and he had a $1 million bounty on his head. Like, what is going on? This sounds like something straight out the damn movie. So I guess her and her sister, or her and her friend, went down there from Miami to Sint Maarten, and I guess they separated, and she went on with the man. I guess they were dating. I don't know the context of how they met or whatever, but so I guess she left with him, and then I guess whoever caught up with them, and then they said they found them you know what I'm saying, pum up and stuff like that right there. And it's so sad and it's so unfortunate, you know what I'm saying. Prayers to her and her family, but not gonna lie, she should never went nowhere with him alone. No shade. Like, that is the first thing. Prayers to her family, you know what I'm saying. And it's just like, I don't know. I feel like I need more details to really talk about it, because like, what was their relationship? Did she not know he had a bounty? You get what I'm saying? Like, you gotta know these things before you just go with people in other countries. Like, it's just so sad and unfortunate. RIP to her. Like, ladies, like, I'm for real. When y'all start going on vacation, do not go nowhere alone. Do not invite nobody back to y'all Airbnbs. Don't go with nobody. Stay with the people you came with.
The last time anyone saw Denisha Delancy alive on social media, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Sun, music. Her sister beside her. The kind of footage you post because life feels good and you want people to see it. She was 29, from Liberty City, Miami. The kind of woman her people described as someone who knew how to celebrate, who made everyone around her feel the moment with her. That was the version of Denisha her family and friends knew. That was the woman who got on that plane. She never came back. In the early morning hours of March 2nd, 2026, her phone stopped answering. Her sister and their friend were back at the Airbnb. Denisha was not. And when the calls went unanswered long enough that the concern became something else, something heavier, the news came through, not gently, the way that kind of news never is. No, she had been shot dead inside an SUV on a dark road in Philipsburg on the Dutch side of Sint Maarten. The vehicle had flipped. The man driving it was also dead. His name was Quincy Damon Sylvester, a Trinidadian national who lived on the island, ran a business there, and carried a life underneath that surface that Denisha knew absolutely nothing about. She had met him that same night. The group had gone out to a nightclub called the White Rabbit. Sylvester was there. Friendly, generous, the kind of man who makes a foreign place feel less foreign. By the end of the night, Denisha's sister and their friend got into the prearranged car they'd set up for exactly this reason. Denisha made a different call. She got into his SUV instead. That was the last documented decision she made. I want to stay with that for a second, because I think it matters, not to assign blame. She didn't do anything wrong by trusting someone who presented himself as trustworthy. But the gap between who Sylvester appeared to be and who he actually was is the thing that keeps pulling at me with this case. He was not a local who happened to be dangerous. He was, according to Sint Maarten authorities, a suspected drug kingpin, someone law enforcement had already identified as tied to organized criminal networks operating across the Caribbean. He had a target on him, an active one, and he walked into that nightclub that night knowing what he was, even if she never did. The police force of Sint Maarten initially responded to the scene as a traffic accident, an overturned vehicle, 2 people inside. But investigators from the major crimes team got there and looked closer. The vehicle hadn't crashed. It had been shot until it flipped. The bullet damage told the whole story of what had actually happened on that road. This was not an accident. This was an execution, and Denisha Delancy was in the wrong seat. What makes this case cut differently than most is not just the tragedy of it, it is the precision. Surveillance footage from the White Rabbit captured individuals watching Sylvester throughout the night, tracking him, waiting. While Denisha danced and posted and lived her sister's birthday trip, There were men in that same club counting the minutes until they could follow him out. She had no way to know that. No reason to suspect it. She was in a nightclub on a Caribbean island on a birthday trip. That detail, the surveillance footage, the watchers in the crowd, is what separates this from a random act of violence. Someone planned this. Someone was patient enough to wait through a whole night of music and drinks and normalcy, and then followed that SUV out into the dark. What they knew about Sylvester, what they had been paid to do, and exactly how many people were involved, that is where this investigation gets complicated. Welcome to Dark Truth Files. She went to the Caribbean to celebrate her sister's birthday. She never made it back to the Airbnb. If you're new here, subscribe and hit that like button and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. We read every single one. The trip had been planned as a proper celebration. Denisha, her sister Sincaria, and a friend flew to Sint Maarten and settled into a private Airbnb on the Dutch side of the island. They had done what cautious travelers do, arranged private transportation, so they weren't relying on strangers to get them from place to place. The early days were exactly what they'd come for. Beach footage, nightlife. The kind of content that makes people back home wish they were there too. Their first major night out took them to the White Rabbit, also referenced in some reports as Nowhere Special. A nightclub, loud, crowded, the kind of place where a friendly stranger with local knowledge doesn't raise any flags. Quincy Damon Sylvester raised no flags. He had built something that looked legitimate. A PVC pipe installation and sales business on Welgelegen Road in Cahill. An address, a trade, the kind of cover that functions precisely because it is just real enough to hold up under casual inspection. Sint Maarten authorities had a different file on him, one that described a suspected drug kingpin using that business as a front, with reach into broader Caribbean criminal networks, including alleged ties to other violent incidents already on the island's radar. Some accounts reference a bounty on his head, a significant one. None of that was visible at the White Rabbit. These were not people enjoying themselves. They were working. By the time the night wound down, the group faced a simple decision. Their driver was ready. The Airbnb was waiting. Sincaria and the friend chose the driver. Denisha chose Sylvester's SUV. She wasn't being reckless. She was making a social decision, the kind people make at the end of a good night. Stay a little longer, keep the energy going. She had no framework for what she was actually choosing. They left the club. The people watching Sylvester left too. On Arlet Peters Road, also known as Old Cake House Road, in Philipsburg, the SUV was hit. The shooting was not a single moment of chaos. The vehicle sustained enough gunfire to flip. That level of damage is deliberate. It reflects either a high volume of rounds, high-powered weaponry, or both. And it reflects the intent of people who came to make absolutely certain the job was done. Both Sylvester and Denisha were found inside the overturned vehicle. Both were pronounced dead at the scene. When the police force of Sint Maarten first responded, the call came in as a serious traffic accident. That classification did not survive contact with the evidence. The major crimes team took one look at what the bullet damage said about that vehicle and formally reclassified the incident as a double homicide. From that point, the investigation moved on two tracks simultaneously. The scene itself. It answered the question investigators always have to ask first. Was this spontaneous, or was this planned? One look at those unidentified figures tracking Sylvester through the night gave them the answer. This was not a fight that escalated. This was not a robbery that went wrong. This was a coordinated hit, organized before anyone walked into that nightclub, executed the moment the opportunity presented itself on a dark road in the early hours of the morning. Denisha Delancy was not part of any of it. She was simply the person sitting next to the man they had come to end. The major crimes team now had a crime scene, a motive direction, and footage of faces they didn't yet have names for. What they did next would determine whether any of this ever reached a courtroom. The major crimes team did not wait. On the same day as the shooting, before the sun had fully risen on what had happened on that road, officers were already moving. Targeted house searches, multiple locations across Sint Maarten, executed in the hours immediately following the discovery of the bodies. That kind of speed does not happen by accident. It tells you investigators already had names attached to Sylvester's world before that SUV ever flipped. They weren't starting from zero. They were pulling on threads they had already been holding. What those searches produced has not been fully disclosed publicly. That is deliberate. The prosecutor's office and KPSM have kept the specific yield of those raids close, which is standard practice in active organized crime investigations where operational security matters. But the speed of the subsequent arrest suggests the searches moved something significant. 2 days later, the major crimes team announced the arrest of a Trinidadian national identified publicly only by the initials AH. Authorities placed him in direct connection with the double homicide. He has remained in custody since. The specifics of his role, whether he was a shooter, a spotter, a coordinator, have not been released. But the fact that he was named and held within 48 hours of the killing reflects either strong forensic positioning, surveillance evidence that placed him at the scene or in proximity to it, or both. The surveillance footage from the White Rabbit was central. That footage didn't just establish premeditation, it gave investigators faces, a timeline, a behavioral pattern. People who knew what they were doing moving through a crowded nightclub without drawing attention, and then disappearing into the night behind Sylvester's vehicle. Pulling identities from that footage, cross-referencing against known associates within Caribbean criminal networks, tracing movement across the island. That is painstaking digital and intelligence work, and the major crimes team was running it in real time. What the investigation has also had to contend with is the transnational dimension of this case. Every suspect identified so far, AH included, is believed to originate from Trinidad. Sylvester himself was Trinidadian. The networks allegedly involved stretch beyond Sint Maarten's borders into broader Caribbean criminal infrastructure. That means KPSM is not working this alone. Coordination with the prosecutor's office has been explicitly confirmed, and the nature of the case, a suspected drug lord with regional connections, cailed in a coordinated hit, almost certainly requires intelligence sharing with law enforcement bodies beyond the island. That complexity is also what makes this investigation difficult to close quickly. Arresting one person is not the same as dismantling what brought them there. The main suspect, the individual authorities have identified as the primary target of the ongoing manhunt, remains at large as of the time this script was prepared. Multiple other individuals connected to the attack are also still being pursued. All of them, per KPSM, are believed to be from Trinidad. The prosecutor's office has been public about the expectation of additional arrests. That language, deliberate, measured, suggests the investigation has identified more people than it has yet been able to detain. Leads are being pursued across jurisdictions. The net is wider than what has been publicly confirmed. What the investigation has also flagged, and this is the detail that speaks to how embedded Sylvester's world was in the island's criminal landscape, are potential connections between the people who culled him and other violent incidents already under examination by Sint Maarten authorities. Specifically, references to the Plumpy Boss shooting have surfaced in intelligence connected to this case. That suggests this was not an isolated grievance. It was part of something larger, a conflict operating across the island, possibly across the region, that Denisha had no knowledge of and no way to see coming. KPSM has made a public appeal for information. Anyone with knowledge relevant to the case has been directed to contact the police force of Sint Maarten directly or through their anonymous tip line. Authorities have also stated explicitly that preventing retaliatory violence is part of their current operational focus, which tells you something about what they believe may still be in motion. While investigators worked the case on their end, something else was happening in Miami. Sincaria had come home without her sister. That is the fact that sits at the center of everything that followed. The grief, the public response, the warnings that spread across social media faster than any official statement ever could. She had been there. She had made the other choice that night, the driver, the Airbnb, the safer road home. And then she had waited for her sister to answer a phone that never rang back. The family arranged services through Mitchell Funeral Home. A visitation held in early April from 4 in the afternoon until 7 at the chapel on Northwest 22nd Avenue. A celebration of life the following day at 93rd Street Community Baptist Church. The kind of services that shouldn't have happened for decades. Denisha was 29. The online response was immediate and enormous. Videos, posts, and comment threads spread across Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and beyond. People who had never met her, processing what had happened to her in real time. The tone split in two directions that rarely agreed with each other. One side led with grief, pure and uncomplicated. The other led with the lesson, don't leave your group, don't trust strangers, don't get in a car with someone you just met in a foreign country. Both responses came from the same place, but they landed very differently on the people who actually loved her. What strikes me about the online conversation is how quickly it shifted from Denisha to behavior, as if understanding the mechanics of what she did that night was the same as understanding why she died. It wasn't. She made a social decision in a nightclub on a birthday trip. The people responsible for what happened on that road made a criminal one. Those are not equivalent choices, and collapsing them into the same conversation does something unfair to her memory. Back on the island, the silence from the main suspects was loud in its own way. The primary individual authorities were pursuing had not surfaced. The network that had sent people into that nightclub, that had run surveillance on Sylvester through an entire evening of music and dancing, had gone quiet in the way that organized operations go quiet when the job is done and exposure is the new risk. Not chaotic, not panicked, calculated. One detail that emerged in this period, not from the investigation itself, but from the community response in Sint Maarten, was how little surprise there was in certain circles about what had happened to Sylvester. Not about Denisha, about him. The island is small enough that reputations travel, and his reputation in the world he actually occupied had apparently included the awareness that he was a man with enemies serious enough to act. That community knowledge, the open secret of who he was to certain people, is something investigators have had to factor into their witness picture. People who know things in environments like that don't always come forward easily. KPSM's public posture during this period was deliberate and restrained. Updates were measured. The appeal for public information was renewed. With the emphasis on preventing retaliatory violence, stated explicitly in official communications, reflected an awareness that what ailed Sylvester was not a closed chapter. It was a signal in an ongoing conflict, and the island was watching to see what came next. For Denisha's family, none of that strategic calculus meant anything. They were in Miami, burying a 29-year-old woman who had gone on a birthday trip and never come back. Whatever answers eventually come out of Sint Maarten, they will not change the shape of that loss. The main suspect is still out there. That is where this case sits right now. One person in custody, A.H., held since early March, and a primary suspect who has not been found, moving through whatever network keeps people like that moving. KPSM has confirmed they are actively pursuing multiple individuals. The prosecutor's office has signaled more arrests are expected. But expected and achieved are two different things. And in transnational organized crime cases, the distance between those two words can stretch for a very long time. The full picture of what Sylvester was involved in has not been publicly established. Authorities have described organized crime connections, drug trafficking networks, regional criminal infrastructure, but the specific scope of his operation, who ordered the hit, and what exactly triggered it at that particular moment on that particular night has not been confirmed on the record. I have my own read on that silence. When law enforcement keeps the motive architecture of a case this tightly held, it usually means one of two things. Either the investigation is still live enough that disclosure would compromise it, or the connections run somewhere uncomfortable. Possibly both. What has not been addressed publicly at all is whether any warning existed. Whether anyone in Sint Maarten's law enforcement apparatus had intelligence on a threat to Sylvester's life before that night. Whether the level of surveillance those individuals ran inside the White Rabbit had any prior footprint that should have flagged something. Those are questions the family has every right to ask, and as far as public record shows, no one has answered them. For Denisha's family, the open questions are not legal abstractions. They are the difference between a case that eventually delivers some form of accountability and one that quietly goes cold while the people responsible remain untouched. They have buried her. They are now waiting on a justice system operating across international jurisdictions, dependent on witness cooperation in an environment where cooperation carries its own risks, pursuing suspects who have already demonstrated they know how to stay ahead of the investigation. Sint Maarten has a tourism economy built on the image of paradise. What this case exposed is what has always existed underneath that image. Criminal networks sophisticated enough to run coordinated surveillance in a crowded nightclub and execute a hit on a moving vehicle without leaving an immediately traceable trail. That infrastructure did not appear overnight, and one arrest, or even several, will not dismantle it. Denisha Delancy deserved to come home. The people responsible for the fact that she didn't are still, as of now, largely free. Denisha Delancy deserved a long life. She deserved to come home from that trip with stories, with photos, with her sister next to her on that flight back to Miami. She deserved decades more of celebrating, of traveling, of being exactly who the people who loved her knew her to be. She was 29 years old. If this case moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to Dark Truth Files. It helps more people find stories that deserve to be told. We will be back with another case very soon.